Cynhadledd, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today on International Women's Day. And I will be making a statement this afternoon in the Senedd about the many challenges facing women in Wales today, as well as the many opportunities. And I'm proud our new employability plan, which the Economy Minister is publishing today, will help every woman in Wales to reach their full potential. Whether it's accessing training, retraining, career change, or starting a new business, women are still disadvantaged by working practices and systems which can limit our progression. And we've set challenging new targets in our employability programmes. We will increase the number of women in the workplace. We will help businesses become more flexible. And we will work with businesses to eliminate working practices that block women from progressing and stifling their potential. It is a matter of social justice and economic common sense. The terrible events in Ukraine continue to dominate all our thoughts. And today I want to talk about what we can and are doing in Wales to support people who are fleeing their homes to seek sanctuary from the war. And I repeat again that Wales stands in solidarity with Ukraine and its people. We've seen the desperate pictures of people trying to flee the cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha during a short-lived pause in the fighting. And we've seen the almost destruction of Irpin. We've watched as tens of thousands of people have crossed into the neighbouring countries of Poland, Moldova, Romania, Slovakia and Hungary. We've heard the harrowing stories of people leaving family members behind to fight, and others not knowing when they will be able to return to their homes and their lives. The UN Refugee Agency has estimated 2 million people have fled Ukraine already, and countless more may be internally displaced because of the bombing. This is a humanitarian crisis on our doorstep, and we are ready to help. Wales's link with Ukraine are long and deep, stretching back into the heart of Industrial Revolution and the founding of the city of Donetsk. And we stand ready to offer practical support and humanitarian assistance to people fleeing Ukraine who want to come to the UK. The UK government must put in place simple, fast, safe and legal routes to sanctuary to ensure that those seeking sanctuary are able to get here to safety. And this was the very clear ask of our First Minister, which he made of the UK Prime Minister in recent correspondence, along with the need to remove the requirement for Ukrainians to provide biometric evidence before leaving Ukraine. Of 17,700 applications started so far, only 300 visas have been issued. The Home Office is praising this first-in-the-world visa scheme. This is because Europe is removing visa bureaucracy for those fleeing altogether. And today we learn of reports of Ukrainian refugees arriving in Calais only to be told they must travel to Paris or Brussels to apply for a UK visa. The UK government must make it easier for refugees, who are mainly women and children, to be able to come to the UK and come to Wales. It must remove all unnecessary red tape and any bureaucracy and provide a streamlined application process for all those fleeing the war in Ukraine. I'm also calling on the UK government to create a fully funded refugee resettlement scheme drawing on the previous experience from the Afghan and Syrian programmes. And last week, the Finance and Local Government Minister and I met local council leaders, the third sector, and refuge support partners to make sure we have plans in place in Wales and are ready to receive people from Ukraine as soon as they come. Local authorities across Wales have been receiving offers of accommodation from people who have spare rooms available and want to help. And we don't know yet when people may begin arriving from Ukraine or how many may come, but we're prepared to support all those who do. There's a strong humanitarian focus across Wales and a strong desire to step forward. We are a nation of sanctuary, ready to play our part in response to this devastating crisis. We've seen an extraordinary and spontaneous response from people wanting to donate clothes, goods, bedding, and other items of equipment to help people in Ukraine. And this shows how generous and compassionate people in Wales are. But the very clear advice we've had from the Disasters Emergency Committee and others working on the ground is that the best way to help is by donating money if you can. And the £4 million Welsh Government made available to the DEC appeal, we will make sure that that funding goes straight to where it's most needed, in the Ukraine. The appeal was launched on Thursday, and the address is on screen now. We've also set up a dedicated web page on our Welsh Government website with further information about how and what to donate. There's also further information for people who may be worried about friends or family in Ukraine. Many organisations have taken decisions to cancel events or to break ties with Russia following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. This is a brave thing to do. It shows solidarity with Ukraine, and that we will not condone or be in any way associated with this unprovoked act of war. And while sanctions and such actions are directed at Russia, they will undoubtedly affect the lives of millions of Russian citizens. But this war is Putin's and his alone. The effects of this conflict will also be felt here too, in rising prices, putting more pressures on households already feeling the strain from the cost of living crisis. We must be prepared for further increases in fuel and food prices in the days and weeks ahead. And Welsh Government support is available for families and individuals who are struggling. Here in Wales, we have many people from Ukrainian, Russian and Belarusian descent in our local communities, and we must ensure our words and actions protect their safety. And I echo the words of my colleague, Mick Antoniff, MS, who last week paid tribute to the brave Russian students and young people who've been protesting across the Russian Federation. They are the real future of Russia. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. And I will now take questions from journalists, and as usual, all the answers will be broadcast live on our social media. I turn first to Felicity Evans.
Minister, thank you very much. Could I ask a bit more about the details of the scenario planning that you have been doing with your colleagues in Welsh local government? For example, how many people would Wales be prepared to accommodate once the problems with the visa schemes are resolved?
We're ready, we're willing, and we're waiting to hear from the UK government what the arrangements will be. I've said very clearly, this is bureaucratic. We want a simple, fast, legal route to ensure that refugees can come to Wales. So last week I met, as I said, with the local government minister, with our local authority leaders, who themselves are willing, ready and waiting. But still, we haven't got those answers from the UK government. I mean, I've mentioned the fact that only 300 visas. We heard this morning 50 it was yesterday, nearly 18,000 applications, and tragic stories of people on the borders stuck in France at Calais, being turned back, and these are also British and Welsh citizens. So we've got to cut red tape so that we can actually get on with getting this moving. Of course, we're liaising and working when we can with the UK government to try and get answers from them. But I think it's also very interesting that Welsh Local Government Association themselves have written to the Prime Minister about this. And they have drawn the attention to the fact that the UK government's resettlement scheme is too complex, narrow and restrictive. That's what they've said. And drawn attention to our European neighbours who've moved at such great speed, streamlining processes and relaxing rules. Why can't the UK government do that? Because we are willing, waiting and ready for the refugees here in Wales.
Thank you. I'm taking from that you're not working, your scenario planning doesn't actually involve working out any particular number for Wales at this point. Then please correct me if I've misunderstood you in that answer. My second question is that you talk about the knock-on effects of the rising cost of living, particularly in relation to the energy crisis. So does that mean that Welsh Government is considering more direct help for families along the lines that we have already seen? And what are your plans to revise Welsh Government's energy strategies in the medium to longer term?
Well, I would like to just say, in answer to your first question again, that clearly we are doing everything we can to plan for receiving as many refugees as we can who can reach us here in Wales. So, for example, all our cabinet leaders responsible for housing are meeting together, met with actually our housing officials in the Welsh Government today, looking at, you know, all the ways in which they can help. I mean, obviously, we've just worked through a very important evacuation of Afghan refugees. And now, you know, we have hundreds of refugees coming from Afghanistan, over 360 now settled from August, living, well, just demonstrating how we as a Team Wales can deliver this. So, you know, looking at not only the offers that people have got from their homes, but also access to hotel accommodation, temporary accommodation, and recognising that, you know, this is mostly women and children, and many of them, they want to be able to get back and be reunited with their families. So the planning and process is going ahead. Just wanted to reassure you that Felicity. But also, you know, it is very important that we do look at the impact of the cost of living crisis. I was only here a few weeks ago talking about our winter fuel support scheme. And there's very worrying statements coming out from the Resolution Foundation today saying this could be the worst year for households since the mid-1970s. Again, UK government's got to play its part, and we're calling on the Chancellor to make sure that the spring statement addresses this. The TUC is calling for this as well as Welsh Government and our Finance Minister, because we have to make sure that there's a new package to enable us to meet the needs of households in terms of rising fuel prices. And let's just also recognise the fact that, you know, the benefits of the going up in April are only going up by 3.1%, inflation running 6-7%. So the UK government can make a change in terms of benefits level, and in the spring statement putting in more money to help us, because we have actually put in 330 million, only announced a few weeks ago, for the cost of living crisis. Now that we will do everything we can to get our funding out to people to help them, but also the UK government's got to respond to this as well. Right, thank you very much, Felicity. Can I go to Andy Davis, Channel 4?
Thank you, Minister. There have been so many examples of families in countries like Poland, Romania, Germany taking in refugees from Ukraine. Is that something that you'd like to see here? Families in Wales coming forward to offer accommodation? And to those who would like to do that, what would your advice be at this stage?
Well, thank you very much, Andy. Yes, we've seen it. We've seen it. You've broadcast from, you know, the front line, those that people in those countries, neighbouring countries, just giving so much goodwill. And of course, with no conditions. I mean, this is what being in the European Union is about, is that you have those open doors, people standing in stations, with, you know, saying, in Germany, saying, you know, people coming off trains, can we help you? All the food, all the accommodation, all the support. And I mean, we know of people who are going out from Wales, not just with goods and support, but also to help meet people that they know. We've got to get rid of all these barriers in terms of family restrictions, because we have so many citizens in Wales who want to help and open their doors. Now, I have mentioned already that the Welsh Government has set up this information portal so that we can coordinate the support that's coming forward from the citizens of Wales. It's interesting, our 4 million to the Disasters Emergency Committee, last night already, Oxfam Cymru and others from the Disasters Emergency Committee Cymru saying that's been increased by 2.5 million, probably more by now, by the citizens of Wales. So, you know, we are here ready. We've got the planning, we've got the coordination, we've got Welsh local government, we've got the refugee agencies, we've got the Interfaith Council as well. We're all ready to help, to respond to the offers of support, but also ready when our refugees can come as they must do. And it is, again, as I say, it's about the UK government have got to stop the rhetoric and look at the reality of people's lives that we're seeing on our screens in Europe today. They've got to change, and that's the call today from the Welsh Government.
Thanks. Just briefly on that, whether you could be specific about what advice you would give families who do want to offer accommodation, who should they contact? And then secondly, I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned the Afghan resettlement programme and that Wales will be drawing on experience there. Can I ask you for your assessment of how well the Afghan resettlement programme has worked here in Wales, and how many of those refugees 6 months on are still waiting for permanent homes, which suggests that there are challenges within the system in Wales to be able to give everyone seeking asylum here a permanent home?
Well, I mean, the response, again, from the Welsh people and from all our partners to the Afghan resettlement programme from the evacuation in August has been phenomenal. As you know, we actually opened with the IRF, our young people's movement, opened the doors to, in a very Welsh way, to families who came and for temporary accommodation stayed in our IRF hostels, particularly here in Cardiff, and then to be resettled across Wales. So we've already seen 256 people resettled in Wales since August, to local authorities since September, and that's across the whole of Wales, along with 360 Afghan people in bridging accommodation. Another more people are due to arrive, in fact, over the next week. We must remember that resettlement programme is ongoing, and this actually does mean people being able to build their lives in a safe and welcoming environment. So I've met with the South Wales Afghan Society very recently to say, to hear about what their feelings are, the families who've been settled in Carmarthenshire, in Deeside, in, Powys, as well as in the South Wales areas. And they are saying how wonderful it is to have this welcome in Wales. We are a nation of sanctuary, and this is the message today. We are a nation of sanctuary, and we wish to use our experience, and it goes back to the Syrian resettlement as well. The community sponsorship, actually local authorities are, as we speak with Welsh Government, looking to ways in which we can develop a bespoke community sponsorship scheme. We're saying to the Home Office, we've done it, we can do it again. We did it in the summer with Afghan refugees. We've got Syrian families in every part of Wales. Now, let's enable us to do this. It will be different. So many of these women and children will be coming wanting to reunite when this terrible Putin war is over. They will want to reunite, but now they want to be here, and we want to make that nation of sanctuary, which we have delivered. We have delivered a reality for the Ukrainian people. Thank you very much, Andy. Can I go to Adrian Masters, ITV?
Thank you, Minister. And can I just revisit the question that Felicity asked you at the beginning about the numbers? I understand that you're saying that you haven't had the numbers from the UK government, but you've alluded to the Afghan scheme as being between about 300 or 400 people. Is that the kind of numbers that you think that Wales and Welsh local authorities can manage?
Well, as I said, we are waiting to hear how the refugees can reach us here in Wales, and we are planning for that. We are talking to all our 22 local authorities about the prospects for supporting them, and we have these offers of support. I mean, I think one of the other interesting points that the First Minister made in his letter to the Prime Minister, the bureaucracy, the red tape. We've asked for the requirement for Ukrainians to provide biometric evidence before leaving Ukraine. We've asked for that to be removed. I mean, this is just holding things up. It's not been asked for in, European Union countries, but we've also asked to extend the deadline for the EU settlement scheme, family permit. This all is about actually enabling us to see how many we could support and help as they come to Wales. I think every community and every local authority in Wales wants to play their part, wants to offer accommodation and support. And that's where, you know, we will then see the numbers as they come forward. But, you know, we can't do this unless the Home Office changes the way it's operating. 300 visas in the, you know, in the whole of the UK, that's absolutely derisory. And, you know, we are going to play our part, as we always have done. And that will be clear then, of course, in terms of where people can come. They've got relatives waiting. You know, we have Mick Antoniff, our colleague, who has cousins and their families wanting to come here. There's no room. There's no movement from the UK government to make it possible for people to be united, let alone letting in, making sure that we can welcome those who actually are refugees coming out, you know, out of Ukraine and needing us. And people are frustrated. Can you put more pressure on the UK government? People emailing me today from my constituency. And that's a strong message to me here, my constituency Minister for Social Justice, but to all our elected representatives in Wales.
Thank you. So, I mean, that's 3 times that you haven't set a number. So I'm taking from that you don't have a number in mind here in Wales. Can you then guarantee that local authorities will have the resources they need to be able to deal with a new set of refugees along with the Afghan refugees that they're still working with?
Well, I'm sure that the Welsh Local Government Association and the leader, Councillor Andrew Morgan, who, as I've referred already to the letter that he's written to Boris Johnson, I mean, it is very much the local authorities as well as our communities who will have the responsibility, as you say, Adrian, to actually welcome and accommodate people, refugees as they come through. You know, and even that is going to be about coordinating family support, because, you know, they will want to make sure that they know who's able to offer room space in their own homes. So it's quite a big logistical coordinating effort. But as Andrew Morgan has said, this is a Team Wales approach. And I think when we mentioned the resettling of Afghan, you know, this was an example of how we could do this. But we do recognise that, you know, that we are already also resettling our Afghan refugees. We are resettling refugees as well from you know, across the board. We have those responsibilities, and also housing needs as well. So we want to make sure that we can you know, open our doors as a nation of sanctuary. And it would be foolish for me today to say, Adrian, you know, a number, because actually we just want to be open. We don't want to be talking about numbers. We want to be open. We want the UK government to respond, to remove this red tape, to get on with it and find this ready, simple route, legal and humane route for our refugees. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I move on to Dan Bevan, LBC?
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon to you. Moving just briefly away from the issue of refugees and onto the money that's being directly given to people who are in Ukraine and who have fled to the surrounding countries. The First Minister has said that what they need is money because of, thankfully, the generous donations from people all across Europe. The Welsh Government has given £4 million. Now, the Welsh Government at the moment has never been better funded because of the response to the pandemic. So is £4 million the best the Welsh Government can do?
The £4 million was a really important contribution to the Disasters Emergency Committee. I certainly would dispute the point about being well funded, Dan, in terms of the you know, the settlement that we got from the UK government. I've made the point in response to questions this afternoon that actually we want to see more money coming from the UK government in terms of humanitarian aid, and also to address issues like the cost of living crisis. You know, we need to see what it is that the UK government is going to do, not just in terms of their own responsibilities, which we've talked about in terms of enabling refugees to get here, but also to fund this humanitarian response. And we are playing our part, despite the fact that the comprehensive spending review wasn't a just and fair settlement for Wales. And also the fact that in the questions about our local authorities, of course, we need to get the funding from the UK government, from the Home Office, to enable us to provide the warm welcome that we want to provide as a nation of sanctuary when the refugees can reach us here in Wales.
Thank you. And on that phrase, the nation of sanctuary, you've mentioned it a few times today, as have other ministers. I wonder, because it hits the ear like a buzzword, what does it actually mean in practice, do you believe? And is the UK as a whole a nation of sanctuary, or is it just Wales?
Wales is a nation of sanctuary, and I'm very proud to have been the minister who announced the nation of sanctuary only a few years ago, when we, because of our welcome and indeed the sort of the historical welcome that we've had to so many refugees in Wales, that we wanted to actually make this a reality in terms of how we treat and welcome refugees and asylum seekers. We have our dispersal local authorities in Wales. Obviously, in terms of our responsibilities and powers, it's about the devolved responsibilities we have to provide housing, education, social care and support. But most of all, a nation of sanctuary is about our beliefs in the importance of the diversity and spirit of Wales being one which is a welcoming nation, looking outwards, always looking outwards to the rest of the world in terms of how we can support them. The nation of sanctuary actually means that we're investing in every policy area in terms of support for our refugees and asylum seekers, acknowledging that the contributions that they make. I'm very proud actually on Thursday of this week that I'm going to visit St Sarah's School, which is has adopted a sanctuary status. It's a school of sanctuary. There are universities that have embraced the nation of sanctuary concept. And I think actually the nation of sanctuary can be shown very clearly in the way that we worked in the summer with our partners in the third sector, our refugee agencies and our interfaith communities to welcome the Afghan refugees. The nation of sanctuary is about the contribution that refugees and asylum seekers can make. And I would say there is no way the UK government, is subscribed to a nation of sanctuary. I mean, in fact, their hostile environment policies and the Nationality and Borders Bill are clear expressions of hostility and not as nations of sanctuary, which we wish to be here in Wales. Thank you. Dan, can we go to Tom Magner, Carers World?
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. Can I step back from refugee issues for the moment? Throughout the COVID pandemic, there were repeated calls for unpaid carers to be classed as key workers, given that they provide at least 96% of the care across Wales. The Welsh Government repeatedly says unpaid carers are much valued. But what real steps are you now taking to ensure that unpaid carers are treated truly as key workers to open the door to much more effective support?
Well, thank you, Tom. And, you know, our Deputy Minister for Social Services, Julie Morgan, has worked relentlessly to support unpaid carers, not just the organisations that support unpaid carers like yourselves, but also unpaid carers themselves, meeting them with the First Minister, recognising what they've been doing, particularly through the pandemic, but also recognising that they're all going to play their part, I know, many of them as they can and are able to support the current refugee crisis that we've been talking about today. But unpaid carers, yes, they are key. They're key, aren't they, to the services that we provide to their loved ones.
In light of that, can I draw your attention to a report just published about the Welsh Government's handling of the Social Services Wellbeing Wales Act? On the 24th of March 2016, the National Association of Social Workers said, and I quote, "Social justice is the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political and social rights and opportunities. Social workers aim to open doors of access and opportunity for everyone, particularly those in greater need. Given this latest report into the Welsh Government's handling of the Act shows that it's failed to deliver social justice to unpaid carers, be interested to know what your thoughts on this situation are. Thank you.
Well, I was very proud to be in the government when we passed the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and you know it's very much underpins our principles of social justice, and of course it is delivered at the front line by our local authorities and the third sector. So of course always looking at ways in which we can then not just support those who work professionally in social services and well-being, but those who are unpaid carers. And I would say also, of course, that includes all the many volunteers who may not be direct carers, but actually provide a very important role, such as the volunteers, for example, for Age Connect in my constituency, who actually link and liaise with many elderly people in our community. Thank you. Finally, I thank you, Tom. Can I have Wales Online?
Thank you, Minister. On the subject of refugees, we know that many families in Wales have offered to open up their doors to refugees. We also know there are people seeking refuge who are being housed in for example, hotels near Cardiff. Would housing people coming from the Ukraine in hotels form part of the Welsh Government's approach to supporting people from the region?
Well, I think, as I said earlier on, there's sort of plans being prepared across a number of tiers of response, really, and this also happened in terms of preparing for the Afghan refugees in the summer. So some were coming into hotels. The Erith, in terms of what happened last summer, was very important in terms of some of the families that were coming directly from Afghanistan. We need to look at this in terms of coordinating those offers of support. Actually, I recall, you know, when the Syrian crisis, many people offered support to Syrian refugees in their own homes as well. But we need to coordinate those offers of support and clearly link them when refugees come through. But the use of hotels, yes, there are hotels that are being used now just to meet housing need, but also to welcome temporary stays for refugees from other parts of the world like Afghanistan. But then there's also the temporary accommodation. I know that, for example, our officials have met with the National Landlords Association. Now they support the private sector landlords who, you know, have always come forward too. They came forward with the Syrian refugee crisis as well as the Afghan refugee crisis. So we've got all our partnerships. We've got the local authorities at the forefront of this, looking at needs and responses that they can give temporarily. And then, you know, we know that actually so many people who will come will want to come for a temporary stay. We have to see how, you know, what their views are, what's happening with, and, you know, as we hope that this terrible Putin war is over, that we will see what their needs are in terms of the longer term. But we have to make use of every accommodation setting that we've got in Wales.
Thank you. And there are reports that Western countries are considering further sanctions against Russia, including, for example, an oil import ban. Given the potential impact, which you've already mentioned, of further sanctions on both people here in the form of rising fuel costs and also on Russian citizens, would the Welsh Government support any UK government pushes for more sanctions?
Well, you know, we're particularly in relation to energy, we are in discussions with the UK government on this issue. I mean, you know, the conflict in Ukraine, as well as the global climate emergency, does stress the need for the UK energy system to move towards local renewable energy, which is completely Welsh Government ambition, and the Minister for Climate Change making this point over and over again, particularly in these very difficult times. We've got to build resilience to ensure continuity of energy supply and mitigate the impact of global energy prices for consumers and move to that green, socially just a transition. But we, of course, in terms of sanctions, we have to, we have to consider those sanctions, and particularly those sanctions that are still need to be strengthened and enforced in relation to the oligarchs. And we know that that is already making a difference. Thank you.